Welcome to the Saturday Morning Nerd Show. I'm your host, Mark Blake, and joined with me, as always, is Mr. Brendan Smith.
Good morning.
Our very own brewing sailor. And, of course, from the Electric Jellyfish podcast, Mr. Chad Womack.
Morning, gentlemen.
All right, we're back.
He uses that term loosely.
Very, very, very.
All right. It's not even noon, and we're starting to get a little kinky around here. So let's see how the show goes.
Jeez.
That's like the wrong left turn at Albuquerque.
We apologize for not being here last week, but we're also very glad that Brendan is among the living and
No
not
kidding.
sick. So
that was, I'd say I'm still not 100%. The last two nights, like I brewed a beer Friday, and I came home and crashed out for 13 hours. And then I went, or Thursday, I should say. And then yesterday I went and, we had an event at the brewery, and I was there for maybe 6-7 hours. And I came home and I was in bed by 9 o'clock, and I didn't wake up till 8:30 this morning. So it's just, my body's still not quite there yet.
but you are here. So
Yeah.
now we got a lot of things to talk about. First of all, since speaking about the brewery yesterday, Brendan got to do something that most guys only dream that they get to do, and you got to hang out with the Iceman, Chuck Liddell, a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, I spent time with Chuck Liddell and didn't get knocked out. So yeah, that was that's a rare thing.
You had your ass kicked enough this week.
That's right. He took pity on me. Yeah, we had the Drinking Bros podcast. For those who don't know, the Drinking Bros Network is the largest veteran community on Facebook. And they have about 1 million different subgroups, of which I'm in like 20 or 30 of them, like nerds, baseball, brewing. I mean, there's all types of subgroups. But so their podcast was there yesterday, and Chuck Liddell was their special guest. They're in town because they were going to a Rangers game last night, and then they're doing a podcast from the Canelo fight tonight at AT&T Stadium. So it was a lot of fun. They hung out for a while. They drank a ton of my beer, and they liked my beer, so that was nifty. And I was wearing my Navy kilt just because I knew a veteran podcast was coming through. I had no idea Chuck was going to be there, and I'm like, hey, my Navy kilt's Iceman colors. It's blue and white. So there you go.
Nice.
And Chuck got a kick out of that too. So I got a picture with Chuck, and it was a good time. Everybody had a blast.
Well, he has always seemed so cool. So that I'm a little envious on that one. But anyway,
he actually made him look small.
Well, I mean, he's probably not as big as he was in his fighting days, but he's probably 10-15 pounds off his fighting weight, but he's still pretty ripped. And yeah, he still intimidating still have the signature mohawk and the goatee, and it looked like one jab would have put anybody in that bar to sleep.
I was shocked, and when I saw the picture that you took with him, I was like, geez, he makes Brendan look tiny, and Brendan's kind of an imposing kind of guy. Like, I do not want to meet Chuck Liddell on a bad day.
Yeah.
So speaking of MMA, because this is a question I would always like to ask him. I introduced a friend of mine. We were talking about MMA movies. Like, have you ever seen Warrior with Tom Hardy and Joel Egerton? And she's like, no. Well, you like the Rocky movies? Yeah, I do. Well, then you need to watch this movie. So she watched it with her cousin last weekend. And my next question was, so how many tissues did you need at the very end? Because even I shed tears at the very end of that movie as the two brothers settle everything after the fight, and they're walking into the locker room, and that's the last sleep you get. I mean, it's a very teary eye. And she's like, well, okay, I needed 3. It's like, that's fair. But my question to Chuck, though, would be like, wouldn't you cry at the end of that movie as an MMA fighter? I mean, it's such a wonderful, inspirational story. It's the Rocky of MMA.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to see how many actual fighters, try to hold back the tears at the end of that movie. Because if you think
none that'll admit it.
No, probably not. Because if you think about it, that movie to MMA fighters is what Rudy is to football players. And then everybody else. I mean, even at the end of Rudy, you're like, yeah. So anyway. All right. A few other things I wanted to mention. Yes, our 5th edition of our new magazine came out last weekend. You can read our articles article about who gives a fuck about the Oscars as we talk about great Oscar controversies, some that we talked about on our last podcast. Yes, nerds, we're still not over after 43 years later how Annie Hall won Best Picture over Star Wars.
Every time. Pisses me off every time I think about it.
That happened, and I was born to remind the Academy of their mistake for all eternity.
So I have this new thing. Like, if I'm going to date a woman and she says she'd rather watch Annie Hall over Star Wars, I'm like, yeah.
That's immediate grounds for dismissal. That's like,
right.
You're probably, as an employer, I'm probably going to fire you. I just want you to know that.
Yeah.
You know, that's right up there with the locked door test from A Bronx Tale. You know,
Yeah.
that's a really solid test right there.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna try and sleep with you. That's how bad that is.
You're gonna be lousy in bed. I can already tell.
Yeah, standards. Not even worth it.
That's the waters.
Anyway,
Nope.
check that out. You can get a free digital download off our website. Also, if you have not checked out our interview with Greg Brick and Lauren Beatty from the film Bloodthirsty, which came out a couple of weeks ago, you can also check that out on our YouTube channel and on our website. All right. A few of the things that we got to mention, the very first being, since we're back in a podcast, is obviously we got past the 5th anniversary of the death of Prince. How hard of a day was that for you, Chad? I know you wrote a really great article about it for our latest issue as well.
Yeah, that was that's always a rough day for me. And I was fortunate enough to stumble across the posting of one Dwayne Tudall, who is the author of the Studio Sessions that came out a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, chronicling the development of Purple Rain, and he's developing volume 2 that's coming out next month. And the day of, he posted the article about the song that I have written an article on myself, that was written and recorded 31 years to the day of that date of his passing. It was recorded in LA on April 21st of 1985. Sometimes it snows in April.
Yeah.
And when you go through that article and you see how Prince always kind of developed songs like that on a Sunday for some crazy reason, anything that was really deep and spiritual and meaningful, he always recorded on a Sunday. And in the stuff that's quoted, he talked to Wendy and Lisa about how they could tell that something special was happening with that song, and it became kind of like our version of John Lennon's Imagine whenever John Lennon was taken from us. I know a lot of people say, no, Purple Rain is the one that touches me the most, but when you hear this song, especially in the context that it was written in, it's a lot more powerful. So it's one of those things where it'll give you goosebumps every time you listen to it.
Right. Well, yeah, like you said, it's always a sad time, in April when we come upon that date. So it's hard to believe that it's been 5 years. So
seriously, though, doesn't feel like it.
No.
Yeah.
And the even stranger thing was, on that day this year, it snowed in Minnesota. It snowed in Minneapolis on April 20th this year. So it was just even stranger.
Before we move on, what are you guys talking about these days on the Electric Jellyfish podcast?
Funny you should mention that. As you can tell by the artwork behind me, we're launching a new one, a new show on the network, where, as you can tell, it's very Star Wars heavy, called Spoilers of the Galaxy. We're going to be talking, Bad Batch and, the different games that may or may not be in development, and just where we are as a Star Wars fan base, as a whole, as a community. But I think we're going to try to record the first episode of that today.
I'll tell you where we are. Screwed. We've got
ever the optimist.
We've got idiots on one side, as one of my favorite Star Wars YouTubers, Justin Is Lost, pointed out. We've got idiots on one side bitching that the Bad Batch has been whitewashed. And we've got idiots on the other side that are complaining about Omega's character because she's a female clone. And then we have Freddie Prinze Jr. attacking fans because he's an idiot.
How many times is this made for him now? What?
Oh,
3?
and he went off on a Black Jedi and because a Black Jedi made a video about it saying, hey, look, the person who went after Freddie Prinze Jr. is definitely not in the right. But Freddie, you work for Lucasfilm, show a little decorum, a little professionalism. And so Freddie goes after him, and I'm like, wow, all this because you voiced a child, and now you're acting like one. Best acting job you've done in years.
Prophecy.
You know what? And I like Freddie Prinze Jr., but there's a great irony to him going off on all this when he seriously complained about Kiefer Sutherland's behavior on set during season 8 of 24. That it was the best.
The best part about it yet was. The best part about it yet, though, was the response somebody gave to him going after a Black Jedi. It was like, hey, Freddie, ABJ's YouTube channel's doing better than yours. I wouldn't talk trash. and it's true, too. Like, ABJ's averaging like 30,000 views a video. Freddie's little thing that he's got going, it's like 700 views a video.
Look, we love you in the Star Wars universe. I mean, Kanan is a great character, and
it is.
Just
don't be a douche.
Yeah, don't.
You know what? You and Sarah raise your kids. Enjoy doing great voice work. Okay, because loved you both in Rebels. It's fine. Don't get into it with people on the internet. This is
even if the person is wrong. Like, and the person was wrong. The person went off on him, and it like I understand what the person was trying to say, but the way they went about it was all wrong. So it is what it is. But that's where we are as the state of Star Wars fandom. Screwed. Too many idiots in the fandom.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the only thing Freddie Prinze Jr. ever has to say to the internet, the Star Wars, couch quarterbacks who think they know everything or whatever. I get to voice a character in Star Wars and get paid for it. I win.
Yeah.
That's it.
How many roles in the Star Wars universe have you played?
Right. Look at my IMDb credits. Look at yours. Yeah. So the rest just basically talk shit on the internet, or they basically just make up shit because they're not getting any actual sources. And I get so tired of the rumors and everything that are the worst because nobody can back anything up. It's just like, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going on. Who is telling you that? Give me an actual source that is telling you that. And the fact that they get hits and make money off YouTube, and I'm like, well, here we are trying to be a credible news outlet where we get our facts straight, and we just don't make up rumors. I can make up rumors all day long.
we can fabricate true shit all day long.
All the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, anyway, but we'll move on. But speaking of the Bad Batch, yes, if you are a Star Wars fan, the Bad Batch was released this week. First episode was on the beloved May the 4th. And then episode 2 dropped yesterday. And the more that I watch Star Wars TV shows, animated and live action, the more I'm just convinced that the movies are not that big of a deal anymore. There's just so much more better storytelling. I love the Bad Batch. I still want the Bad Batch with a bit of an A-Team theme song, but that's just me personally.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Right.
You need help. You
call run from the Empire for a crime they refuse to commit.
I told you when it was announced it was going to be the Star Wars A-Team.
I know.
I would love that voiceover. That would be kick. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it.
I'm waiting. It's not going to be Hunter, but I'm waiting for Tech to be like. I love it when a plan comes
together.
Well, because he wouldn't say comes together. Because
you're right. You're right.
I love it when a plan comes to fruition.
I was thinking about that last night as I was folding laundry and watching the second episode, and the title was so perfect, Cut and Run. But they do this little intro, and I'm like, I can hear the voiceover in my head. On the run for a crime they refuse to commit.
Yeah.
Right, I'm trying to formulate in my head how exactly he would say that. I adore it when a well-executed operation comes to fruition.
That'd probably be it.
But I mean, the big guy, pity the fool who tries to stop the squad.
Yeah, that's their
There's
prerogative.
just so many. You know what? Here's what you really need to do. You literally need to have Mr. T voice a character in the Bad Batch, just to add to it. Actually, get them all of them that are still alive, make a guest appearance. But anyway.
And kudos to G. Bradley Baker, by the way. Kudos to that guy.
Oh yeah.
And that's, by the way, that's why somebody said it was whitewash, because a white guy voiced these characters who are supposed to be Maori and they lighten the skin tone. And I'm like, so Dave Filoni is racist for doing that. Let me ask you, he casted David, I'm gonna butcher this guy's last name, as Agent Callus. So that's a man who's about as black as you can possibly be, cast as a white dude, a white Imperial. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think Dave Filoni's really interested in race. I think he's interested in who do the job best, and I think you're more interested in race because you want clicks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, if you just want to make up bullshit to get more clicks or whatever, the QAnon movement is still going on, and they have YouTube channels. Anyway, so love the Bad Batch. Both episodes were great. First one, watched it a few times. We finally get to see a little bit of Kanan's origin story and what happened. To me, I mean, it's easily as perfect as you can get. Loved all the characters and can't wait to see more. So that's my personal take on it. Brendan, I know you were really excited for this one. You actually did a screening of the first episode Tuesday night at Craft and Growler. What have you thought so far? But
I really like it. I think the only issue I had with the second episode is I think they tried to push the father-daughter dynamic with Hunter and Omega a little quickly instead of just letting it develop naturally. Right. And that's a minor gripe. Other than that, I thought it was pretty good. I like, for folks who are, a little bit more rabid like myself, I like how they talked about the origin of the chain code, because in Mandalorian, Boba Fett shows the Mandalorian his chain code to prove that the armor is his. So we get to see the origin of the Imperials creating the chain code, and how it's used and to create a database of people, and you can track people everywhere, and how they're becoming a very fascist regime, like actual fascism, not like we throw it around today. But because people just like, if somebody doesn't like you, they immediately call you a fascist and a Nazi, and it's like, that's not how it works. So the actual definition, state controlled and controlling everything, how they're tagging all the personally, I think his bit where he was tagging all the videos, I think that's just Dave Filoni taking a shot at every state's DMV, and I'm okay with that. Right. But yeah, I think it was a very, very good start. I'm looking forward to see where they go. It's been hinted that this season will directly affect things that lead into Obi-Wan, the Kenobi live action show that's coming out next year. So I'm interested to see how that might affect that. Might they go to Tatooine? Might they run into an Obi-Wan on the run trying to get to Tatooine? So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I know we're getting Fennec Shand pretty soon, a very young Fennec Shand. So that'll be interesting. Also voiced by Ming-Na Wen, who's now got the Disney trifecta because she's a Disney princess, a Marvel character, and a Star Wars character. So,
by the way, I want to point this out. She is going to be 58 years old and is still absolutely fucking gorgeous.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And then I'd be interested to see if she ever gets cast in Pixar, just so she can get the Disney foreplay.
Disney foreplay. I gotta remember that term.
Well, that's not usually what happens in my head when it comes to Star Wars foreplay.
That usually involves a Leia slave bikini with you. Anyway.
No, it doesn't. That's the lie.
Contributed to this.
Hey,
and all of a sudden, everybody's flashing back to an episode of Friends.
Yeah.
Chad, your thoughts on the Bad Batch?
This is probably going to come as a shock to you guys. I have not watched the second episode yet because I didn't realize it dropped last night. I thought they were dropping them on Tuesday.
Yeah, they surprised everybody.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's started on Tuesday, but it'll be every Friday going forward. Although I don't know if they've announced how many episodes yet.
Your nerd credibility was here.
I'm sorry.
It's now
no
here.
one said anything.
Hey, Chad. Spoilers.
Yeah, no shit.
Sorry.
You're spoiling the spoiler of the galaxy, you bastard. But no. I can at least comment on the first one. I thought it was brilliant. The pacing was on point. The guy here that's looking like the dashing rogue. He's kind of like the outsider on Spoilers of the Galaxy. He's not as steeped in Star Wars lore as Shannon and I are. He's more of a Marvel guy. So he's our primary contributor on Spoilers of the Multiverse. And I was like, dude, at least watch it, because he had no real interest in the Bad Batch, and he watched it Thursday. He's like, dude, I'm sold. I'm all in. I'm completely in on this show. And he even went back to the final season of the Clone Wars to see the episodes that the Bad Batch were kind of featured in. So this apparently is a really good jumping in point for people that really haven't embraced the Star Wars animation that Disney has kind of inherited from its predecessor.
Lucas.
Yeah. I mean, I fell in love with Rebels the first moment I saw the first episode of it.
Yeah.
Oh God. There's so much misinformation about, like, somebody's like, I got into an argument the other day because somebody's like, I don't watch any of that cartoon because that's all Disney junk. And I'm like, dude, the Clone Wars started on a Cartoon Network. And he goes, no, it wasn't. It was on Disney XD. And I'm like, no, Rebels was on Disney XD. The Clone Wars was on the Cartoon Network for 5 seasons. It was on Netflix for 1 season and Disney Plus for 1 season. It never aired on Disney XD. And in fact, it came out before Disney XD was even a network.
Right.
Like, dude, this is not like crazy stuff that you can't find. It's like a simple Google search will tell you these facts. So please stop just making shit up and spouting nonsense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think that, like you said, Marcus, I'm perfectly content with Star Wars living out the rest of its existence on Disney Plus. I don't ever have to go. I mean, yes, do I want to see a real big budget theatrical release of Star Wars? Of course I do. But what they are doing with it on Disney Plus, barring a few exceptions, I could have done without Resistance.
Right.
But with Rebels, with what they've done with Clone Wars, obviously what they've done with The Mandalorian has completely taken my breath away. If this is their idea of the status quo as normal, of how Star Wars will be treated on Disney Plus, I'm all about it. And if
the only movie that's been announced in the next 5 years is that we know of is Rogue Squadron, the Patty Jenkins movie. Everything else is TV.
Well, no, they're still planning on doing that movie in the High Republic, with going back 400 years.
That hasn't been officially announced. That's rumor only.
No, it was actually officially announced as in development. Yeah. Because there was
not at the Star Wars Day event where they announced all the shows. The only thing that's been officially announced.
I'm just telling you, there was a press release about it. So it just says it's in development. Now, whether it's going to stay that way or not,
yeah.
Who knows?
The only thing they've actually said, like, this is the name of it and it's coming out, that has anything to do with the High Republic era, is the Acolyte TV show.
Well, and that might have switched from what they were trying to do to going to a TV show now. Like I said, when it was first announced, it was in early development. So, but we do know about the Rogue Squadron movie being directed by Patty Jenkins, and you're right. That's the only thing that's officially on the slate with a date. So, but to Chad's point, I still want to go see Star Wars movies in the theater. I still want to have that experience, even if they're not, and they're never going to be as good as the original trilogy and stuff. But if we can get fun movies and still have a great fun experience, especially with the events that we're trying to do here at that nerd show, I still think it's important to see Star Wars on the big screen.
I would love the crossover event that concludes the Mandalorian, Rangers of the New Republic, and Ahsoka shows, and I guess now the Book of Boba Fett as well. I would like that crossover event, the finale of it, to be a 2-hour movie that we can either see on Disney Plus or go into theaters and see.
Well,
yeah. If they can make them as good as The Mandalorian theatrically,
actually,
yes.
I'll give you one up. When they did the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, you could screen it, and then they also did a screening in theaters because we saw it both ways. And if you want to be able to have, like, it comes out at this time, and then there's a live streaming at the same time on or whatever on Disney Plus or Premiere, that's fine. I'm happy with that. I'm just saying that we shouldn't lose the experience of being able to enjoy Star Wars on the big screen, okay? Especially for theaters, because I mean that it isn't just going to see something like this. I mean, you can make an event out of it. I mean, obviously you're not going to have to sit in line anymore like you used to back in the good old days, but dressing up, having events or parties or whatever, we still need that. And I hope that does come back, past the pandemic. So, all right. But if you haven't checked out The Bad Batch, first 2 episodes are on Disney Plus. Go do that. If you don't, we might have to revoke your nerd card. We're just saying. But one final thought on The Bad Batch. Why can't I get that as a video game? As a squad video game?
If they
Republic Commando was just
I was about to say,
just remastered and re-released. Okay. See, that was awesome. I love that Republic, they actually remastered it so it actually looks better.
Right.
Freaking, they're about to re-release. Actually, I think it dropped yesterday. They re-released one of my favorite games from 20 years ago, Baldur's Gate: Dark Alliance. Okay. It's one of my favorite D&D hack and slash games of all time for the PS2. And our buddy Adam and I got it when we were living together off base in Hawaii. We were like, oh, this will last us all weekend. 13 hours later, we had beaten the game. So they re-releasing it. They're not remastering it, and they're charging $30 for it. For a 20-year-old game, not even remastered. I'm like, come on, that's just a cheap money grab. And they're like, well, the disc, if you buy the disc, is $30. Yeah, because the scarcity of the PS2 disc, because nobody sold it because it's a great game. Everybody still has it in their collection. That's a collector's item.
Yeah.
A digital download is not a collector's item.
Yeah.
That should be $10. That's stupid. I'm sorry, that just pissed me off.
And that's why they're not getting. That's not why they're not going to get my money for it. So.
Not me. I'll wait till it's on PS Plus for free in 6 months because it will.
Right. I mean, hey, you wanna keep. It's like the Call of Duty games. I don't mind you remastering older editions of good Call of Duty games and selling them for $20-$30.
It's like I can't wait to see what Aspire does with the remake of KOTOR. I mean, I know that hasn't been officially announced yet, but everybody knows it's fucking happening.
But like I said, I mean, being able to have a remastered edition, if you want to charge me $20-$30 for it, I was happy to give my $30 over to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which we all generally consider the best out of that series. And it's great. I've been through it again a couple of times. Still has fantastic replay value. But anyway, all right. Moving right along, we're going to jump to the subject at hand. Today, we are talking about why can't movies and TV keep with the original source material? Before we do that, which will lead into our bigger discussion, we want to start with this week's zombie apocalypse. Now, I want to preface this before anybody on the internet starts accusing us of being racists. We're not making this a race issue. We're complaining about Warner Brothers making this a race issue. It was announced that they are all gung-ho, and yes, they are now going to make a new Superman movie, but it's going to be a black Superman, and they're going to get a black cast, and they're going to get a black director, a hot black director that's been nominated for an Oscar. And this is Warner Brothers' solution to fixing their problems with their DC movies. This is how they're going to solve it. Well, if you want to make basically your own version of a black exploitation film, sure. I sort of get that and that mentality because you've kind of had that fucked up mentality since day one. But here's the thing.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
there is a way they could, and there is a Black Superman in the comics. It's part of the multiverse. His name is Calvin Ellis. Cal Ellis.
Yes.
Okay. So, and there is a way they could do that. You know, there is a way they could introduce it and it not seem like totally virtue signaling to the African American audience. You know, they got this little Flash movie coming out in a couple of years called Flashpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you introduce the character via Flashpoint, it would make more sense to the audience and say, okay, they're not just, this is a different Superman from a different world where where everything folded out a little differently. And, you know, Kal-El was actually a black man from Krypton, because I'm sure they had multiple skin tones on Krypton. So, you know, I mean, hell, there's an Asian Superman in the multiverse. There's all types of different Supermen in the multiverse. So you introduce it through Flashpoint, you have it come in, and then when you do the Black Superman movie, it makes a lot more sense from a storytelling perspective, rather than just we're making him black for the sake of making him black because it looks good.
Yeah, and that was basically my overall point too, is there's so many different ways you can go because of the multiverse. Okay. I mean, the new Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, they've already said, will be a Batman on Earth 2. Okay. So it's fine. And we're not complaining about having a black Superman, because the story of Calvin Ellis, I mean, it's a great Superman. All right. It's an interesting story. Fine. Bring it. Okay. But quit trying to give us this diversity It just seems like they had a black Captain America on Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and everybody didn't lose their shit. That it was like everybody was just like, okay, yeah, Sam becomes Captain America. We already knew that. Like there was a collective ho hum. There wasn't any outrage at a black Captain America, and so WB's like, look, we can do that too. We have a black Superman. Yeah. We're more diverse than you are, and we got to have our Oscar bait. Just stop. Okay.
So, like I said, if you're gonna do it, just do it in a way that storytelling makes sense. Because meanwhile, your whole fan base for years has been clamoring for a Jon Stewart Green Lantern movie, and you refuse to give it to them. Like the one original black superhero character that you have. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, not one. They've got more, but the biggest one, the one that's on the JLA. You know, you don't even give it to the fans. It's like, God damn, Warner Brothers. Like, but they know better. Oh, that's the story. Like, you know, AT&T, I think, is just giving Warner Brothers staff enough rope to hang themselves.
Well, here's the thing. You lost to Marvel a long time ago because you weren't even ready to reboot all this. You reboot the DC movies out of necessity to try to compete with Marvel. But Marvel and Disney had a very clear plan from the beginning of how they were going to introduce all of these origin movies, the Avenger movies, to the Infinity Wars and beyond. Okay? Guess what? They got there first. You screwed it up. Or it wouldn't have been so screwed up if you just let Zack Snyder do his thing and control whatever. And and that got demonstrated when we released his cut of Justice League. And even though it is 4 hours, turned out way better. You know, that's
like I say, if you look, I know it's 4 hours. I know it's tough, but if you just fast forward through the slow-mo, it's only 3.5.
Right. But still, you know, you had that golden opportunity, but you know, just because it's not in DC wasn't going to beat Marvel anyway. As soon as somebody got there first, setting out a proper blueprint with all of these great characters, everybody else was going to come in second place no matter what.
Can you imagine if WB slow played it and said, like, all right, we're not going to catch him at this point. So what we need to do is devise a plan to start pumping these movies out. And their phase 1 had started right around the middle of Marvel's phase 3. So that when Endgame dropped and was like, basically you knew there was going to be a big lull until phase 4, they were ready to hit with the first Justice League movie, and then go and spin off and bring, you know, get to their phase 2. They could have hit the ground running and just took the baton from Marvel, and just taken the money, because Marvel had a big layoff, COVID hit, and I mean, look at the titles that are coming out for phase 4. I mean, other than Spider-Man and Doc Strange 2. The only one I'm really interested in is Shang-Chi, and that's just because it's different.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of them, I'm like, I'll go see them because they're Marvel, but I'm not like, oh, yay, this guy.
Right. I mean, and you're right. I mean, they're going to be great in their own way, but they'll never be as good as leading up to the Infinity War movies anyway. So
no, I'm more interested in Oscar Isaac's Moon Knight TV series that's going to be on Disney Plus than I am half of the movies.
Yeah, so am I.
But Warner Brothers, just stop. And that's the sad thing, is we've given you the perfect way to have a Black Superman, to introduce it as from a multiverse and to introduce a really good character. And you probably won't. You'll just have to no, it's time that Clark Kent become black. It's like,
we're going to reboot Steel.
Right.
Sorry, I just have an image of Shaquille O'Neal. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
I love Shaq.
You talk about Flashpoint. With them, they're actually going back and exploring the multiverses, to the fact that they actually are getting Michael Keaton to come back and reprise his role as Bruce Wayne, an older Bruce Wayne. And supposedly there's still, is a possibility that Ben Affleck would come back. And all I'm saying is, you've got multiple ways of being able to do this. I mean, the WB shows, all their crossover events for years were great. Okay, so just stop. And we don't need a superhero movie being made for Oscar bait or to show how diverse. I don't care. I think we've said this a number of times. I don't care what race or gender your main character is, as long as the story is well told. The moment that the race and or gender becomes the story is the moment I lose interest.
Yeah.
Well, if your intent is to make it diverse or blackify everything, at least do me this favor, Warner Brothers. At least just let Tyler Perry do everything and stay out of his way, because I feel like he knows what he's doing. And that's, you take the Medea movies. I mean, obviously,
I'm just imagining Medea as Martha Kent. Hold on.
I know.
Say that name.
Obviously, we're not the target audience for Medea movies, but there's a lot of them that are great. And I love the one. Well, Medea wasn't really in it, but I love the Tyler Perry movie Daddy's Girls with Idris Elba. And Medea goes to prison or whatever. It's obviously something that can go beyond race. It goes beyond its target audience, and you can enjoy it. And I attribute that to Tyler Perry knowing what he's doing. So, but I'm sure Warner Brothers will fuck all this up. So, and
it's what they do
about it on the show. So it's a guarantee. All right. Sticking to the original source material, that is the topic of the day. And we asked the question of why they can't just do this. And Warner Brothers will complain about you again. We've given you the perfect example of what you can do to introduce all of these different characters and to do it right. The source material there, it's there for a reason. Okay. It's the perfect blueprint. Okay. But
if you're adapting it into television or movie, it's probably pretty good.
Right. So
it doesn't need your help.
Let's start off with the latest thing that just pisses us off, that you just couldn't stick to anything and decided to make your own little movie. We finally got a Without Remorse movie, which
sort of.
Yeah, sort of. We got the Without Remorse movie kind of in name only, with the character name and the title. Also, he was a Navy SEAL. And that's really about it. Brendan and I were talking about this. You've done with this movie to the book with what they did with the Matt Damon Born Identity movies. Well, you got the characters' names and the organization's names and the title, but that's really about it. I understand that the original Without Remorse movie is basically middle of the Cold War. It's set in the 70s. I get that. And I'm not advocating that we should go back and have this movie set in the 70s.
Oh, I am.
Well, although I think that would be awesome.
I am for all of Clancy's properties because, let's face it, the Americans have shown that a period piece Cold War spy thriller works just fine.
No, and I agree. I was going to make the same point. I'm not disagreeing with that. If that's the argument about why you don't do it, then fuck you. How many Emmy Awards did that show win? So, also, by the way, talking about sticking to original source material, those scripts were pretty much based off like things that actually happened in previous cases, loosely, to the fact that the show creators had to get their scripts okayed by the CIA for using original source material. So, a little irony there for you. But I could personally live without them actually going to the 70s, even though that's what I would really want. You can make it a more modern version and introduce this character and how he becomes John Clark and yada, yada, yada. But I also think you literally miss all the emotional levels of the original book. It isn't just about a guy seeking revenge for being betrayed and his wife being killed, or else that would just be the Punisher. Okay, there's more to it in the people that he encounters in the novel. Like, we can't have a little bit about him encountering a prostitute, falling in love with her, killing her pimp, and drug lord.
And not just, by the way, not just killing her pimp, but throwing him in a hyperbaric chamber and raising it and lowering it until the guy is nothing more than a quivering mound of flesh, and then tossing his ass into the Chesapeake Bay for the crabs to eat him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the greatest scene ever written by Tom Clancy. I was reading it going, holy shit.
Yeah. But I mean, it also introduces so many more levels to who, John Kelly, who will become John Clark, really is. He isn't just seeking revenge and all that. You know, he does have a heart. He's trying to do right by other people. So without remorse, all I have to say is, and I personally gave it a 5. It was average at best because of the action. I like the action. And I think Michael B. Jordan proved that, he can be a really good action star.
And I have no problem with him as the character of John Kelly.
No.
I just, it had nothing to do with the book.
No.
And let's be honest, and spoilers here, if you cast Guy Pearce in a supervisory role, you know he's going to betray you.
Pretty much.
Like, I call that from the get-go. I'm like, oh, Guy Pearce is the Secretary of Defense. Yeah, he gonna be a bad guy by the end of this.
Yeah, that was
just saying.
And I get that you're introducing a young Robert Ritter, who we all know from the Clear and Present Danger book and movie. It's deputy director
of operations. Yeah,
right.
Which is another thing. They keep referring to Jim Greer was a great operator. No, he wasn't. Jim Greer was a surface commander in the Navy. He then was deputy director of intelligence. He was never an operator. God damn, read your source material.
I know.
Oh, it's almost like it's the theme of the show.
Well, so like I said, you've gotten this thing where I get you're kind of rebooting Jack Ryan and you're giving him an origin story. And what they did with the first season of Jack Ryan was great. You hit all the notes to how he goes from being an analyst to kind of being in the field and whatnot, how he meets Kathy.
And then they got scared and they didn't do Cardinal of the Kremlin, and they did a really bad take off of Clear and Present Danger. And
right. But you set everything up into a modern world that makes sense. Okay, but all of the building blocks and what really as an origin story is there. Okay, that's what I'm saying. You don't. I get if that's. I get if that's what you want to do, and that's fine. Um, Here's something that I think you really miss out, and this is actually my kind of favorite part of the novel itself. There's a reason this story is set before Jack Ryan, because Clark is older, has more experience. He's been doing this a while. At least in the Sum of All Fears movie, they at least pointed that out with Liv Schreiber as John Clark. Okay,
Yeah.
they at least got that right. But you've missed the fact that John Clark and Jack Ryan actually have a connection because it was Jack Ryan's father who is going to bring him in for his crimes, you know, and you actually get a very brief glimpse of a young Jack Ryan about to join the Marines. So John Clark knew his dad. And how, if you had just set this like kind of, 15, 20 years, like before or whatever, and had that little bit, and now we kind of get to see an older John Clark being introduced into the new Jack Ryan series, that would have been awesome to have that little. So that's what I'm saying. There's too many little things there that you miss an opportunity on, and maybe you can't fit it into a 2-hour movie. Okay, whatever. But you could have done an 8-episode TV series because it's been done before, and it turned out fairly well. So, hey, Chad, what did you think of the Without Remorse movie? Or did you just like forget about it because it wasn't even worth your time?
No, I watched it, but I wasn't really familiar with the source material. I mean, I've read a few Clancy novels, but not any that really featured Clark as a primary character. I mainly got into The Hunt for Red October and Cardinal of the Kremlin, and he may have been featured in that, but I just never really picked up on him as
the only two that were really Clark centric were Without Remorse and Rainbow Six.
Yeah. I never read either one.
In the rest of the books, he's been a side character in the Ryan verse.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't even get introduced until Clear and Present Danger, right? That is actually...
and the one he's in the most, or the two he's in the most, would be like Executive Orders and The Bear and the Dragon.
Right. So
it just came off as very generic. I was like, yeah, we've been here, we've done this 100,000 times before. It was underwhelming. It didn't bowl me over. I'm like, yeah, that was kind of cool. He did some really wicked shit when he was pissed off, but I'm just like, okay.
Well, I mean, setting the car on fire and going into the car and questioning to do, it's like, oh well, that's kind of cool. Is it a hyperbaric chamber? Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to have seen that.
But, right. To be able to film that on the big screen, that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
So and we've gone back and forth with this, regarding like, Tom Clancy movies and series. I get that you kind of have to reboot it for modern age. Again, I'm not necessarily complaining about that. It's hard to make movies, based off the Cold War when you're, 30 years removed from it. All right, you want to put it into a much more authentic setting. But at the same time, I feel like we're kind of in another Cold War with Russia anyway, as long as Putin is alive. So there's so many different things that you can do. And like Brendan said, I mean, the series completely missed the boat on being able to do Cardinal of the Kremlin, and which I hope they kind of get back to it. If they're
and they just and to explain to Chad what happened. Chad, did you watch the first season of Jack Ryan?
No, I did not.
Okay, at the end of the first season of Jack Ryan, Jim Greer gets assigned to Moscow, and he leaves a ticket for Ryan to come visit him. And it's like and Marcus and I immediately went, oh shit, they're gonna do a modern telling of Cardinal of the Kremlin. This is gonna be awesome. Then between the two seasons, all of this shit with the first Trump election with Russian collusion and all these stories came out, and you can tell Amazon went, nope, not going to do that. We're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. And instead they hit the very first episode is, instead of setting up the Cardinal of the Kremlin in season 2, is Greer getting sick and getting recalled back to Washington. And it's like, it's like they just pussed out. That's all it was to it.
I feel like we're never going to get, a movie or a series based on that story. And it is such an incredible book, too. I mean, I know kind of dated and more of a period piece anyway. But I feel like as long as Putin is still alive and trying to, you know, bring back the Russian Empire, you're always going to have that opportunity of the U.S. squaring off. So
I've always wanted to see Red Storm Rising personally, because the ship that I was assigned to in the Navy is in that book. So and it gets the
is it really?
yeah.
Oh, nice.
That there's actually a great scene in Red Storm Rising too, because there's a young Air Force captain and a squad of Marines that are escaping the base in Keflavik that gets overrun by Russians, and they're trying to get across the island to another base, and these Marines are just trying to run this Air Force captain into the ground, trying to break, because they're Marines and he's Air Force. Well, about halfway across the island, the Marine sergeant's talking to the Air Force captain, and the Air Force captain lets slips that he's a marathon runner. And they're like, "Are you fucking kidding me? I've been trying to run a marathon runner into the dirt. God damn it."
Do your intelligence research.
You know, getting back to sticking with like the source material, and I know there's different versions of the Marvel comics, but the touchback on Sam becoming Captain America, you know, there is that version, and how they kind of did it with that series and setting it up was perfect. And I think Marvel, in a lot of ways, has honored the comics more and more. Yeah, they take their liberties, obviously, but it's not so much that it completely changes the story. The idea of the original story is still there, except for like a few little details. And I feel like if they just let Kevin Smith control everything in the Marvel, or I mean in the DC universe, you know, it would be the same thing.
Somebody that has a clue about the source material, just a little bit.
Yeah, there's a reason that there's a reason that you have this.
Like they need their Kevin Feige, and Jar Jar Abrams is not the answer. The destroyer of franchises is not the answer.
Well, again, getting back to Star Wars, this is why we have to have our own Filoni that are just little by little. No, we're going to pull this from the expansion universe. I mean, the legendary universe. We're going to make this canon, and we're going to take the great aspects of storytelling that we loved in those books, because these are guys who've read the books just like us. I've heard Favreau mention before, you know, as a young enough, you know, up and coming actor, you know, he would read Star Wars books. And you know, Filoni has, but you're given a roadmap. Unless you're creating something that is unique unto yourself, like your own story within the lore, which is fine. But if you're borrowing from characters that have already kind of been established or mentioned, your job really is to adapt that to the big screen. That's all you're doing, and is to take that source material. Well, I'll use James Bond as an example. As when they decided to reboot, and they finally, you know, gave us Casino Royale, that was not a satire with Peter Sellers and David, which is still a funny movie. I still love it, but the only thing that they really, really did with that source material, they gave you all the characters, they set it up perfectly, okay, with kind of, you know, what the even though the plot was a little bit different about them trying to manipulate the stock market or whatever, instead of it just being a simple crime of, you know, trying to blow people up or whatever. So I get why you had to make kind of a modern telling, but really, other than that, the only difference is they're playing Texas Hold'em in the card game instead of Baccarat. Okay, but everything else is kind of there. I mean, right up at the end. I mean, including, I love Bond's kind of last line when, you know, Emma's talking about Vespa, and he just cold and calculated, the bitch is dead, you know, life goes on, and he, so to speak, and he takes that, you know, he takes that line directly from the book.
No.
So I appraise the aspect of what they're doing by also kind of bringing it into the modern age of technology.
And they fixed the drink. It was never shaken, not stirred. You don't shake a drink that doesn't have fruit juice because you bruise the booze. You chip the ice and water down the booze. So so he did the proper Bond martini, which is 3 measures Gordon, 1 measure vodka, 1/2 measure Kina Lillet, stirred over ice, strained into a chilled martini glass, and served with a twist of lemon.
Yeah,
and he picks it up and goes, that's quite good.
It's a very classic drink. But again,
it'll also knock you on your ass.
I bet.
Stood. And even though the other stories aren't really based off of books, how they're introducing Spectra, the way they kind of did with the books, little by little, what this organization is, and how everything was kind of connected, I thought was also brilliant. They honored the source material and understood how Ian Fleming was setting up, what I like to call the building blocks of this bigger organization, why Bond is such a threat to them, that kind of stuff, how agents knew of each other from different countries, keeping tabs. All that was kind of there, but you had to bring in some modern, idea. By the way, if anybody didn't really notice, I know Spectre was not the greatest of movies. I mean, it's an okay movie, but the whole registry, keeping tabs and everything, that is actually based on a very old idea of Cold War, of keeping track of everybody, and when they wanted to have a national registry and stuff like that to gather information, in the best way to be able to share that information before you had computers and stuff. So all they did was just kind of, and of course you had people against that, that thought that was too much power in one person's hands. All I'm saying is you took that basic idea from the novels, but you gave it a much more modern, idea on it based on the technology. So at least that was being honored, than completely ignoring the source material. Here you go. Here's an action movie based on some characters from a book. It's the same thing.
You got the characters' names right. That's about it.
Yeah. So, Chad, something that has always made you mad when they don't stick to the source material.
Well, I mean, you've kind of covered it, where you more or less just disrespect what everyone's idea of that character is whenever they grew up on a particular version of that source material. There are times, though, and I don't know where you plan on going with this, but there are times where I have found that sticking with the source material wasn't always the best idea. And when they did change certain things about that source material, it actually made for, I think, a better film in certain respects. To whereas, if they cut a certain aspect of a subplot out that just drags the story down and doesn't really add anything to that character, it's kind of a good thing.
For example,
Jaws. Big time Jaws. That whole subplot with Hooper having an affair with Brody's wife. If they would have put that on screen, it would have dragged that film down into the freaking depths. No pun intended. It made you not really give a shit about Hooper because he was kind of a prick.
Right.
And he was just a narcissistic asshole. And you really weren't sorry to see him go, because he does go. In the book, he does not survive.
Right.
And for Spielberg to take that from Benchley and say, you know what, we need to kind of rejigger this character a little bit, because Dreyfuss is such a beloved actor that I don't think it would have played all that well on screen. And I think just cutting that out made that movie flow better.
Well, I get what Benchley's trying to do with the book. He's trying to make these characters complicated while dealing with, a bigger circumstance, with a shark that's terrorizing the beaches. That's fine. But from a movie standpoint, your entire plot is about them trying to survive this and people not taking it serious enough. Yeah. To which more people die, and then you have to hire, Quinn to go hunt the shark, and that's your story. If that simplifies it way too much compared to the book, fine. I get books having many layers, and different little subplots. But there's a catch-22 to that. If you're doing a 2-hour movie, sure, absolutely. It wasn't necessary. It didn't drive the movie in any way. It needed to be cut. However, if you got all these little subplots and character developments of all these great characters, you can't really do it in a 2-hour movie, can you? You need a 10-episode series like Game of Thrones. At least up until the point where there is no more source material and you have to go based on notes.
Yeah, notes and
outlines. You can't get anything done.
And by the same token, look at First Blood. Look at the source for First Blood. He didn't even survive that thing. Rambo died, and he was more or less played like the bad guy in that story. That they kind of played Troutman as the villain if Rambo is the hero, but actually he was just trying to talk him down off the ledge. And Rambo was responsible for a lot more casualties in that book than was portrayed in that film. Civilians died and shit. He was not really somebody that you could connect to as an audience member. I was like, I'm kind of glad they changed that shit. Well, because and we probably don't even need to get started on Lord of the Rings on how much they had to take out of that because it was so rich in characterization.
Look, we still honor Peter Jackson for trying to at least making.
Well, I think the biggest thing they took out of that was just Tom Bombadil.
Tom Bombadil and the scouring of the Shire.
Yeah, and the scouring, that's true. But and I am thankful they took that out, because as it was when I was watching The Return of the King, people didn't understand that the battle happened in the middle of the book.
Right.
So after the battle's over, there are people in the movie theater going, "When's it gonna end? The battle's over. When's the movie gonna end? Why is it still going?" And I finally had to just get up in the middle of a crowded theater and yell, "When the fucking book is over, now shut the hell up. Some of us are trying to watch."
Shut the fuck up.
Well, kind of touching on your point about First Blood, and I'll bring up another book that I thought where the miniseries of the movie was better. David Morrell was really just trying to touch on how we didn't really care about our vets and how they were returning home and just kind of left them on their own devices.
True.
And we pushed them too hard and they
Worst
snapped.
Case scenario. Yeah, this is what can happen if we don't pay attention.
Right. That's what that commentary is. It wasn't just one. And, in the movie, it's the sheriff who is the embodiment of all of society when it comes to Vietnam vets.
Right.
I do think the movie is better. I think Rambo is a much more sympathetic character, a broken character, versus some guy that just snaps and goes all ape shit, and this is what happens. Not to take away from the book, because it is a great commentary on American society and the government that forgets about its vets and always has. One of the things that I'll bring up two different things. When I was growing up, I love the North and South miniseries from the 80s. And I mentioned a while back that I actually found it on DVD for $8 on Amazon. And it had all three, book 1, 2, and 3. We don't watch 3 because it's completely stupid and there's no reason for it.
It's bad.
And there was no reason to even write that as a book. That was just a cash cow by John Jakes. But the first two, the books, I got to say, really aren't that good compared to what they did with the miniseries, and because you do forget that Ori has a brother that is older than him and stuff, and somehow they had to bring him back in book 3, and what, he had a brother? I don't know. Anyway, you're also, and I like how, Ori doesn't really die, and there is a reason of how it all gets cobbled together, and you see that despite what was going to happen with Reconstruction, how hard it's going to be on the South, people can start healing and getting back together when you have these two best friends, one from the North, one from the South, who are like, we're going to go back into business together. We're going to rebuild your home. We're not going to let this war divide us and blah, blah, blah. It is much more TV friendly and happy and blah, blah, blah. But they just did things so better than what the books were.
Has a very Rocky IV type ending of if I can change and you can change, everybody can change.
I had a teacher in high school that anytime she taught the Cold War, well, here's your movie for the day. Because if Rocky can single-handedly win the Cold War and inspire everybody.
Wow, what a guy.
You know, Warren Remembrance, the Winds of Warren Remembrance were another good example of how I think TV did a little bit better and made it more gut-wrenching than what the books did. The books didn't talk about they talked about the Holocaust, obviously, a lot, but they didn't get as detailed. I remember being 10 or 11 when that came out and it being on TV. And I mean, it was the first time ever. Well, they got just as brutal with the brutality. I mean, on national TV when they're rushing people into the gas chambers, you're seeing them die, you know, and it was just as serious as Roots. The first time you saw that and you see him getting beaten and whipped, and you had never seen that on film, ever. I mean, it brought it to the forefront of this is what happened. And LeVar Burton was so fantastic. So I didn't even bother to watch the remake. I'm like, there's just no way you're going to be able to capture the original. So why even bother? But I'll get with you there. Those are two examples I have, I think, where they were able to do a little bit better than what the book is, but, you know, honor the original source material.
Well, and honestly, like, I think one of the prime examples of something that I don't think even had a chance of sticking to the source material was World War Z. How do you make that in its form as a manuscript into a story that would play on screen at all? I mean, at all. It's the only thing that I don't even think they got characters' names right. I think they just got the title right. That's about it.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm kind of okay with that because I enjoyed the movie. I'm like,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it would have made a good film if they had respected the source material. It wasn't coherent.
Well, but you know, Max Brooks has his flair of dark comedy like his dad.
Yeah.
And it's evident in that book. You know, another one that I don't think really mattered, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I mean, the movie's kind of trash, but you're like, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you're going to tell it. You're still taking a Jane Austen novel about love and marriage and blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's zombies out there,
of
too.
Course, yes.
And one of them wants to have a zombie army. And
I'd tell you what needs to be adapted into an actual stage play, though, is from book is the Shakespearean Star Wars novels, where the guy wrote Star Wars in iambic pentameter.
Yes,
right here.
Verily, A New Hope.
Yeah.
Yep.
By the way,
I have them as well.
If you want a good satirical TV show, I recently discovered this on BritBox. I did not know this existed. I'm ashamed to say, because we have BritBox as a streaming service too, because why not? On top of everything else we pay for. Upstart Crow, a satirical British series about William Shakespeare, how he became William Shakespeare, dealing with the guy he's in awe of that's always stealing his work, Christopher Marlowe. The chambermaid who's wanting to be an actress, but legally she can't audition for Romeo and Juliet because she's a woman, and women always have to be played with men. And where would they put the coconuts? Yeah. But I look at that as you pay homage to so many great little things about Shakespeare, including some of the conspiracies that he didn't write his own work and all that, that honoring, from a satirical standpoint, honoring the source material, kudos. I hope they get another season. I think I think that was another one that got shattered by the pandemic. And I don't know if they're coming back. By the way, Gemma, the woman that played, I don't know, she was on Game of Thrones. The sister.
That narrows it down. There was about 50 of them.
I know. Why am I? The Iron Islands. She played the sister of the guy who.
Theron's sister.
Theron, thank you.
I don't forget the actress's name.
Yeah.
God, that was painful.
I know. Help me, narrow it down.
I'm trying. I'm IMDbing as quick as I can.
I know.
Whalen.
Anyway,
Emma Whalen, founder.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She plays the actress in this show, and it's so brilliantly funny that I literally forget her being an action star, loving women, and all that from Game of Thrones. Like, I only see her as this kind of ditzy, but obviously smarter than the men, in this series now. But again, I bring that up as an example as even through satire, if you constantly honor the source material, okay, while you're making fun of it, you're better than the people, fuck the source material. We're just going to borrow names. It's no big deal. And why can't there be zombies in a Jane Austen novel? So,
we put zombies in everything else these days. I mean, why not?
Oh, shit.
I know. All right, here's something. How many books have been written about vampires and vampire lore?
A lot.
Maybe sometimes we should actually stick to the source material and how vampires work, so that they don't twinkle and
oh boy,
look like glitter. And you basically.
Oh.
Because
I'm like, funny story about Twilight. Aaron read the first one, not realizing that it wasn't satire.
Oh shit.
So she thought it was satire and thought it was kind of funny. And then she read the second one and she's like, wait, is the author being serious?
See, this is why I love Aaron too, because I look at it like this is just a satire on vampire and werewolf, right?
It's like, I still think the greatest meme when they came out was there's two great bits about that. There was the first was the meme where the only vampire movie I want to see, and it's Edward, and behind Edward is Blade with his hand on his sword. And then the other one was, I forget the name of the comic strip, and they're based out of Dallas too, I think. But anyway, the guy's wearing, he's at they draw themselves, basically caricatures of themselves and just about nerd life and whatnot. And so they're at the movies, and his buddy's got an Team Edward shirt on, and he's got all his popcorn and soda in front of the rest of the shirt. And his buddy comes up to me like, how can you possibly wear a Twilight shirt? What the hell is your problem? Blah, blah, blah. Go to the next panel, and he moves the stuff, and it's Edward James Olmos from Battlestar Galactica.
That is funny.
I would totally wear that. So.
Oh yeah, you can get the shirts too. I'm looking them up right now.
Oh my gosh! Speaking of Battlestar Galactica, we're entering yet another reboot of the series.
Hijinks Ensue is the name of the comic, and yes, you can buy a Team Edward shirt. I will link it in the Facebook for this video, and it's $19 to $21.95 depending on the
I'm looking at it.
Size.
Nice.
That's funny.
Speaking of Battlestar Galactica, we're gonna have another reboot, and I think they're like trying to do a 2-hour movie or maybe another series. I'm not exactly sure what. So the question I have regarding our topic of the day is, if you stick to the source material, okay, then you're basically just going to do a carbon copy of what they've done before, or you have to change everything to make it unique. Therefore, it's going to suck. So basically, no matter what you do, it's just going to suck. And why should we care? Like, I realize that the original series didn't explore it that much and everything. I mean, they only had like one season to really explore the lore and what happened, and why Baldur did what he did. Ronald, I feel like Ronald Moore, given that he had multiple seasons and better technology and stuff, was able to say it's more complicated than that with these characters. And then it's not that they're just on the run from the Cylons. They have to basically rebuild society. Okay. After the fact, you find out who's responsible for it. Oh, and by the way, he's the vice president. You try to rig an election to make sure he doesn't become president. And then you really build into all this lore about the 12 models of Cylons, and what they're really trying to achieve, their own sense of creation and their own sense of what they believe. Oh, pretty much like anything in society. How do you capture that in a reboot? What are you going to do that's going to be as brilliant? I just can't fathom that idea. I mean,
see, they're out of ideas. So
this reminds me. This actually reminds me of a very important moment in geekdom.
Okay.
Back in the days of the Plano Expo Center, sci-fi expos.
Yeah.
At the time, I was part of a fledgling group of Star Wars fans, the DFW Fan Force, and Richard Hatch was a guest at this particular expo. I don't know if you may or may not remember this, guys, but at the time, back in the early aughts, Hatch was shopping around his pitch for a reboot, remake, sequel series to Galactica.
Yeah.
And it was basically kind of like a mashup of Galactica and Star Trek The Next Generation. It was Galactica The Next Generation. And he had a sizzle reel that he brought with him. And at our table, we had all this, the TV and a big sound system and stuff. And he actually brought the video cassette over to our table. He says, "Would you guys mind playing this?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, we'll play it." And you just saw this mass of people gather around the TVs that we had set up watching this trailer. And he pulled an Ian McDermott and roll it again. I mean, everybody just lost their shit 2 times in a row. And if they had just gone with that rather than what they did on Sci-Fi, which I'm not saying what they did on Sci-Fi was bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it was not at all related to what they wound up doing on Sci-Fi with what he was pitching. And a lot of the original actors had come back to do their roles again. And I was like, I would have loved to have seen this, but honestly, I think that's probably the only way that they could do that and not be so derivative. At least it would resemble and respect the original source material, unless you're just going to reboot and go in a completely different direction, which is probably what they're going to want.
Actually, I see that would have been great. Like, where is their society after they've had to rebuild it 20 years down the road? How have they built up? The colonials and stuff. Also, you can pretty much erase Battlestar Galactica Earth 1980 or whatever.
Yeah, I was about to say, as long as you don't do that shit, don't go there. Let's not make this chips in space like they were trying.
By the way, all right.
Estrada.
Yeah.
Barry Van Dyke, Dick Van Dyke's son. I find it interesting that he has come on board in 2 great series back in the 80s or late 70s and 80s for the last season that turned out to be horrible. Like when they were trying to reduce it. The first one was Battlestar Galactica. Like when they replaced all the original characters and they had new characters. He was like the lead jock guy in Battlestar Galactica, and the one that we hate. And then what does he turn around and do? When Michael Jan Vincent was so drunk they had to get rid of him on Airwolf, we found his mysterious brother.
God.
They rebuilt the entire crew of Airwolf in that ridiculous last season.
You thought replacing the Duke boys were bad in those last couple of seasons. Let's try this shit.
Oh, that's right. They did replace the Duke boys.
Yes,
I forgot about that.
No.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
that shit happened.
It's like Voldemort. The seasons that shall not be named.
It shall not be named.
I was like, the original actors, I think, with the Duke boys, I think the original actors wanted more money. And they were like, well, we'll just replace you and it'll still go on just fine. And not so much.
Yeah. We don't want Bo and Luke's cousins. No, thanks.
Yeah. All right, so I here's my favorite thing that honors lore and source material. Okay, Star Trek for the most part. I'm not talking about what they're doing here recently, because Discovery outside of season 2, when it was really about Pike and Spock and everything, even though they introduced that Spock had a sister, it's kind of gone off in weird little directions or whatever. I mean, it hasn't been absolutely terrible. It just hasn't been as good as the heyday. So if you take, starting with Next Generation, and then Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and even Enterprise, all of that lore that we love about Star Trek that leads to, their timeline, I felt like they honored. They really truly honored with Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. Okay, and then gave you all the building blocks of what was going to happen, what would be the future of Starfleet, the Enterprise, and all that with Star Trek Enterprise. They paid attention, they understood it, even if it kind of went off on little weird tangents from time to time. It introduced great characters.
All you need to know about the respect that Star Trek of that generation paid to the originals is Aaron likes to tell a story about Jonathan Frakes when he was directing First Contact.
Yeah.
Alice Krieg, who played the Borg Queen, had a Starfleet blaster rifle, a phaser rifle, and it was set to the wrong setting. And he yelled cut and said, "No, you need to put it to the right setting." And she's like, "What? Because anybody's gonna notice?" He goes, "No, you don't understand. I'll get letters."
Yeah,
I'll get letters. He's like, "You got to put that at the right setting before we film this scene." So yeah, right. So I mean, that's all you need to know about how that generation, like, they know the fans love the material. They know that they're going to nitpick everything, and they respected that and accounted for it.
And they obviously love the material if they had that much reverence for it.
Yeah, and my favorite bit, although I do feel bad for Discovery on one thing, because, like, first of all, their original uniforms are just god awful, right? We can all agree those blue uniforms are terrible. You can't even tell what any of their ranks are unless you're like 2 feet away from them. So
right.
Then they got the gray ones, which at least you can tell what they have very clear rank markers. Okay, they're a little drab, I'll grant you. They kind of also look like they were the Crusade era Babylon 5 uniforms, but that's okay. So, but then people were like, no, they're too drab. So instead of being a gray uniform with the color stripe for whatever, you command, engineering, science, whatever, they flip it so that the majority of the uniform is the color you are, and then you just have the gray stripe. Well, now the command looks like it's a McDonald's uniform. So people are like, welcome to the 33rd century. The ice cream machine's still broken.
Yeah. Very, very true.
That said, I can't wait for Strange New Worlds, because going back to the original Trek formula with the original Trek uniforms, granted a modern take on them.
Even with Picard, the first season of Picard, how they brought back old characters. Like I feel like what they did, you had to have Hugh in there, and that was so. And they got the original actor back too. There's so many little details that you understood why things changed. Obviously post them being off the Enterprise. You understand uniforms were going to change and blah blah blah, but they didn't change all the aspects of Starfleet. They showed how it evolved. They showed how it could still be corrupt. You understood why they stopped. The plot was very understandable about why they stopped. Dealing with androids and stuff. And there's so many little touches there that, unless you watched Next Generation, you weren't going to get related to Data. Okay. My favorite episode of Picard is always going to be episode 7, when they have to go into hiding with the Rikers. And I literally love that one little scene that, if you just don't know Star Trek, when she walks up and gets introduced to Riker and she tilts her head sideways, and that's when he notices that she's got Data DNA in her. And so, yeah, the reverence there, that love Kurtz, whether you like Alex Kurtzman and his thing about Star Trek or not, whatever. But there are people that pay attention to the source material, to the lore, that understand the minor details make the difference.
Picard also gave us the greatest meme of 2020. Picard, shut the fuck up. Written by Will Wheaton, directed by Will Wheaton, produced by Will Wheaton.
Right. All right. There's obviously a lot more that we can talk about in the nerd universe about not paying attention to the source material. We'll probably revisit it at a later date, but we mostly just kind of wanted to complain that quit making Tom Clancy movies and ignoring the actual source material. You can update it to a modern tale. That's fine. But if you're going to ignore the brilliance of the storytelling or what drives these characters, then you shouldn't be doing it. Because if you don't, then you get Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit.
Shadow Recruit. What a stupid name.
The only thing you even got right in that movie was he was in a helicopter crash. He had to rehab. And somewhere in that, he had economics and followed money. But other than that, it's like, wow, okay, I'm done.
I would say it came out in 2014. When did Tom Clancy die?
Something died.
Okay, Tom Clancy died 2013. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the making of that movie killed Tom Clancy. I'm gonna blame that movie for Tom Clancy's death. Okay.
He was on set visiting, and then he started.
They saw the title Shadow Recruit and had a heart attack and died.
Then
I'm gonna join
he
you.
started pulling a Fred Sanford. Oh my God!
After Sum of All Fears, I can't take any more of this.
I actually watched the Sum of All Fears the other night, and don't get me wrong, it's kind of a terrible movie. Obviously compared to the book, and Ben Affleck should never be Jack Ryan. But the concept of what they were trying to do, like it's like they gave you really the Cliff Notes version of a nuclear bomb being smuggled into the U.S. That's the best way that I can describe the movie. All I kept thinking about watching that movie is, I do love Morgan Freeman, but how do you not like Morgan Freeman? And then,
but then he wasn't James Greer.
Right.
Like you see Morgan Freeman, I'm like, oh, they got Morgan Freeman to replace James Earl Jones as James Greer because it's set younger. They needed a younger act. I'm like, that's great. That makes sense. That's a great casting. He's not James Greer, huh?
I know. You got a really good cast other than Ben Affleck in that movie. But as I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, I really want a Liv Schreiber John Clark movie because he would be a really good John Clark. That's all I kept thinking about.
That.
And then I kept thinking about, why couldn't they just give Willem Dafoe his own John Clark movie back in the 90s? That would have been awesome. But we can't have nice things like that.
No, we can't.
So anyway,
no.
We'll be back next week. But we'd love to hear from you about things that drive you nuts when they don't stick to the original source material. And things that when they do, or maybe they make it better in some way, like we talked about with Rambo First Blood, or miniseries from the 80s, like North and South, or The Winds of War and War and Remembrance. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to do it right, the rule of thumb is stick to the source material. It's there for a reason. So, especially with comic books and all that, I'd like to think they knew what they were doing. So, especially Stan Lee. So, anyway, or you could just hire nerds to get the job done for you, who actually knows these things and what you should stick to. So, but I like that about Jonathan Frakes too. Yep, we pay attention to detail, or I'll get levels.
Or we'll get crucified.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. We got more exciting things coming about. If you're in the Dallas area, go see Brendan at Craft and Growler and try out some of his new beers. Very much enjoyed watching the first episode of the Bad Batch there this past week. Hope to do something like that again.
Yeah, we're gonna do watch parties for every episode of the hour-long live action shows. So when Book of Boba Fett comes out, Kenobi, Andor, Ahsoka, Mando season 3, we're gonna be doing watch parties for every single episode. So
awesome, love it. I can't wait for Kenobi to come out. That's gonna be great.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's probably gonna be March, April next year. It's
You
filming
know what? By the
now.
way, I
So
want to comment on that. I'm glad that they got everybody back. I don't really know what Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen are really going to do in that series, but I think it's great that you brought them back for a little bit. And I love
not
the
die.
fact, well,
We know that they're not going to die yet.
they're not going to die yet. But the fact that you that Bonnie Passe, who played the original or who played Aunt Beru in the prequels, I'm glad that she's coming back to reprise that role. Because if you don't know much about her, you weren't really keeping up with it. You know, she got sucked into that whole Nexium
thing, yeah.
Yeah, and married a guy who was also in it. They're still together, and that documentary series from that on HBO
is that the cult that the girl from Smallville was the recruiter for?
Yeah, it's the one that she was like number 2 in, and they branded themselves. But you know, stuff like that, your career can kind of take a nosedive and all that. I'm glad that she's being able to come back, and I think that, I mean, that's like coming full circle of, I had a career, I got sucked into this, I got out, I'm back in the Star Wars. So Bonnie Passe, we just want to say, welcome home. Welcome home.
Glad to see you back on track.
Right. So, and just because you're Aunt Beru doesn't mean we can't put makeup or little CGI face or whatever on you, and you can't be other characters or voice other characters in the Star Wars universe. So, but yeah. So also, we still don't know what's going on with Allison Mack. She still hasn't been sentenced yet. I wonder. Good. No, I feel like if they got Keith Raniere for 120 years in prison, I feel like they're going away for a long time. And that's, you know, it's weird. I started watching Smallville again, like the good episodes, not every episode, not the Dawson's Creek bullshit episodes. And it's just weird to look at it now, because I look at her as, you were so sweet and innocent before you got sucked into something stupid.
But was she?
Now you're batshit.
Yeah. I don't know.
Batshit crazy, yeah.
I mean, there was that episode in season 4 where her, Lana, and Lois get taken over by witches, and they seduce Clark in the barn.
And Kristen did kind of take a little swim through Nexium with her, so you know, she dodged that bullet and jumped out.
That might be a training video.
Jesus.
Yikes.
Yeah, no shit. Damn.
One day we're going to hear the story from Tom Welling. I got branded on that episode.
Oh, no.
No, we love you, Tom. I just had to make that note. You know, by the way, speaking of that show, one last thing. I love the fact that Michael Rosenbaum has a fantastic podcast and got into that. He's always great.
Oh, God. Speaking of Michael Rosenbaum, there was somebody, it was like happy birthday to somebody involved with Batman, or maybe the Batman, I don't know what it was, but anyway, John Cryer is like, I don't know, he's kind of always been a dick to me. And then somebody else who played the Joker, I don't know if it was, I forget who it was, but somebody else who played the Joker was like, yeah, really? And then Michael Rosenbaum was like, agreed, total dick. Oh, it was Superman. It was Superman. It was like, Superman, it was happy birthday.
It was all the different actors that played Luthor. Did Clancy Brown chime in or something?
Yes, it was Clancy Brown who voices Lex Luthor in the So it was like they were all like, yeah, what a dick.
Asshole. I was like, Jesus God.
Well, and the truth is, he really isn't. I had a few words, not like words, but got to chat with him a little bit. They were here at one of the big Comic Cons in Dallas, and there wasn't really a line getting autographs or anything like that. And Tom were just kind of standing around like, and I just walked up, introduced myself, and chatted with them both for a little bit. He is actually incredibly nice, but I love when, see, among all the controversy and shit and people trolling each other on the internet, when you can have actors joking around with one another like that, just fake little feuds on Twitter. I mean, it's like the Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman thing. Ryan Reynolds will pop into anything, and they're always giving each other such a hard time. So we need more of that in this crazy fucked up world. So, especially when K-On! Is on the rise again, because Anyway, we don't want to talk about that. La 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 la. But anyway. So we'll be back next week talking about more nerd stuff. Check us out, what we got going on at thatnerdshow.com. We'd love to hear from you on Twitter at thatnerdshow. And keep up with our That Nerd Show weekly news. We've got great, fantastic featured articles. And if you didn't catch the first one, check out the first article we did, How the Mandalorian Saved Disney Star Wars.
Mhm.
And it did.
And it
So,
did.
all right. And then check out the Electric Jellyfish Podcast, electricjellyfishpodcast.com, right?
Yes, sir. And any and every social media platform and podcast platform, we got tons of them available. Just wherever
I'm pretty
podcasts
sure
be
it's
listed.
not hard to find the Electric Jellyfish Podcast.
No, it is not. No, it is not. I've made it as easy as possible.
Chad, I do want to say this though. I love the name and I love the logo, but there is a part of me that is thinking you are some kind of Bond villain, and I'm worried.
Yes, sir. That's the point.
Don't you foil my plot.
Exactly.
All right. All right, everybody. We're out of here. Stay nerdy this week.
Take care, guys.